Module 3 of the CCO SEER Stat package training modules presents information on how to produce cancer survival statistics using SEER Stat. In this module, you will gain an understanding of some of the different measures of cancer survival and learn through guided examples how to use the survival session to produce crude and age-standardized relative survival ratios. Some key skills covered through this module are how to use the CCO databases to analyze cancer survival, how and when to adjust for changes in classification of multiple primary cancers, and how to use the International Cancer Survival Standards in age-adjusted analyses. We'll begin with a brief overview on measuring cancer survival. This section will only cover a few basic concepts that are helpful to know prior to running the SEER Stat survival session. More information can be found at the SEER website. Cancer survival can be measured in different ways. Two common measures of cancer survival are observed survival and net survival. Observed survival can be described as the probability of surviving all causes of death among people with a cancer diagnosis. Simply put, it is the proportion of people still alive at the end of an observation period out of the total number of people at the start of that period. Net survival, on the other hand, can be described as the probability of surviving a cancer diagnosis in the absence of other causes of death. With net survival, we are only interested in the excess mortality that is caused by a cancer diagnosis. There are two different ways to measure net survival that both attempt to isolate the effect of a cancer diagnosis on survival. The first is called cause-specific survival, which estimates the probability of surviving cancer by using detailed cause of death data to identify and include deaths due to cancer and censor deaths due to other causes. The second measure is called the relative survival ratio. This statistic accounts for other causes of death, or background mortality, by taking the ratio of the observed survival among people with a cancer diagnosis to the expected survival obtained through life expectancy tables among people matched on age, sex, and calendar year in the general population. The focus of the rest of this tutorial will be on relative survival ratios, or RSRs, as these are the most commonly used statistics when analyzing cancer survival using data from population-based cancer registries. We'll begin with a simple example for producing crude relative survival ratios using the survival session. You can follow along in your own copy of the CCO SEER Stat package. For this example, our question will be, what was the 5-year RSR among Ontarians aged 40 to 59 with cancer diagnosed between 1994 and 1998? What is the 5-year RSR for this age group in the latest period? First, let's take a closer look at our question to extract all of the parameters for the analysis. 5-year RSR indicates that the type of cancer statistic we are interested in is survival, specifically relative survival ratios measured 5 years after diagnosis. The question asks for this statistic for all Ontarians, which indicates the geographic level based on residence at time of diagnosis. And the 40 to 59 age group is the population of interest. As we are interested in those diagnosed between 1994 and 1998, this indicates that within our population, we are only interested in assessing survival of people diagnosed within these years. Finally, the question asks us to produce the same statistic for Ontarians aged 40 to 59 who were diagnosed with cancer in the latest period. This indicates that we will need to repeat the analysis using a different approach called period survival, which allows us to estimate 5-year RSRs even for cases in our dataset that do not have the full 5 years of follow-up. Keeping these parameters in mind, let's open up SEER Stat. Since we want to produce relative survival ratios, we will use the survival session. Upon opening a new survival session, 2 warning messages will appear. The first states that the expected survival table could not be located and that it will switch to the default. As the default expected survival table in our database is the Ontario expected survival table, this warning can be ignored. The second warning is informational and states that the new default in the SEER Stat survival session is to exclude patients who were diagnosed at age 100 and older from survival calculations. We will also note here that all survival analyses exclude patients younger than 15 years, such that survival analyses are always limited to ages 15 to 99. Once you have read the message, you can opt to not have the warning appear in future sessions. First, in the Data tab, we will need to select the appropriate database. As we're interested in the survival of all Ontarians diagnosed with cancer, we will select the database called Ontario Cancer Incidence 1981 to 2016. In the Statistic tab, ensure that Relative Survival is selected. The remaining options in this tab can be left with the default selections. The Iterer2 method should always be used for calculating the cumulative expected survival from the Ontario expected survival tables, and the actuarial method for computing survival time should also be selected, as this is the appropriate method for assessing survival in large population-based cancer registries. In the Selection tab, we will reduce the databases to only the cases that meet the criteria for our question. Clicking on the Edit button will open up the case selection window. Here, within the variable list on the left, we will click on Age at Diagnosis to make selections within the Age Recode variable. Clicking on the variable will reveal all the variable values on the right. We will select only those diagnosed at ages 40 to 59 years. Next, we will click on the Sex YearDX Geography folder to make selections within the year of diagnosis variable. For the first part of this analysis, we want cases diagnosed between 1994 and 1998 only. Finally, as you learned in Module 1, we will need to adjust for the change in classification of multiple primary cancers that occurred in 2010, since we will be comparing survival during a period prior to 2010 to a period after 2010. To do this, we will select the IACR multiple primary flag and ensure that only cases that meet the previous IACR multiple primary rules are included. Next, we need to make the appropriate multiple primary selection. At the bottom of the tab, you will see a drop-down menu with different options for which tumors to include in the survival analysis. We will select First Primary Matching Selection Criteria. The Parameters tab is unique to the survival session. Here, we need to select the method of calculating survival, the study cutoff date, and the statistics we want to see in our output. First, for survival calculation, we will ensure that pre-calculated duration is selected, and that survival months from complete dates is chosen from the drop-down menu. Next, we will ensure our study cutoff date is set to December 2016, as this is the most recent year of complete data available in the current database. Now, to minimize our output, we can select only the 5-year interval, or 60 months, and deselect all statistics except for relative, so that we are only shown the 5-year RSR in our output. The Table tab requires no changes for this example. Finally, in the Output tab, we can add a title for the final output. Clicking the lightning bolt icon will execute the session. In our output, we can see that for people aged 40 to 59 diagnosed with cancer during the 1994 to 1998 period, the 5-year RSR was 65%. Now we want to see what the survival for this age group is in the latest period. To do this, we need to go back to the Statistic tab and select Period Survival. You will receive a notification stating that the results of a period survival analysis can only be displayed in annual intervals. As we are interested in annual and not monthly intervals, we can ignore this message. Since the period survival approach assesses the survival of cases most recently diagnosed in our dataset, you cannot specify diagnosis years. If you attempt to rerun the analysis with period survival selected without removing diagnosis year from the Selection tab, you will encounter a warning message. Simply go back to the Selection tab, click the Edit button, and delete the Year of Diagnosis selection. We are now ready to rerun the analysis. Going back to the Output tab, we can update the time period in our title. As we are calculating 5-year RSRs using the period approach, the analysis will be for the latest 5 years in our dataset, which is 2012 to 2016. Our output now shows the 5-year RSR among 40 to 59-year-olds diagnosed with cancer in the latest period, which is 76.1%. We can see that cancer survival among this age group has changed. However, to truly compare survival over time, we must age standardize the relative survival ratios to account for differences in age structure of the population between the two time periods. In this next example, we will demonstrate how to produce age-adjusted RSRs using the survival session. For this example, our question will be, what are the age-standardized 5-year RSRs for female breast cancer for each of the LHINs in Ontario for the latest time period? Here, we will be looking at a single time period, but comparing survival between different jurisdictions which have different age distributions. Before we get into the analysis, we will briefly discuss age standardization for survival. According to the International Cancer Survival Standards, or ICSS, there are 3 different weighting standards that should be used to age-adjust survival statistics. These 3 groupings are defined by the pattern of incidence by age for different cancer types. ICSS Standard 1 is used for cancer sites with increasing incidence by age. This applies to most cancer sites, including the All Cancers Combined category. ICSS Standard 2 is used for cancer sites with generally constant incidence by age. And finally, ICSS Standard 3 is used for cancer sites that mainly affect young adults. Getting back to example 2, we will again take a closer look at the question to extract all of the parameters for the analysis. Age-standardized 5-year RSRs indicates the type of cancer statistic we're interested in, which this time will be age-adjusted. Female breast cancer indicates our cancer type of interest, our population, as well as the ICSS standard we will need to use for age adjustment, which will be ICSS 1. As the question asks for the statistics for each of the LINs, this indicates that we will need to stratify our analysis by geographic level, specifically by LIN of residence at the time of diagnosis. And finally, here again, we are interested in the 5-year relative survival ratios for the latest time period, which indicates that the approach will be period survival. Keeping these parameters in mind, let's go back to SEER-STAT. We will now open up a new survival session. In the Data tab, we will again need to select the appropriate database. As we want to examine female breast cancer survival by LIN, we will select the database called Ontario Cancer Incidence with LIN 1986 to 2016. In the Statistic tab, ensure that relative survival is selected. Since we are interested in examining 5-year RSRs for the most recent period in our database, we will select period survival. Now we can make the selection in the middle portion of the tab to enable age standardization. Checking this box enables the selections within this section. Since we are going to be producing 5-year RSRs for female breast cancer, we can leave the standard population at the default selection of ICSS 1. However, you can see in the drop-down menu that there are 3 standards to choose from. There is a unique age variable that is grouped into 5 age categories that must be used with the survival age standards. The default selection is always the one that is used, except when analyzing age-standardized survival for prostate cancer, for which there is a special age grouping. In the Selection tab, we will click to edit the case selection again, selecting only the female population, and then selecting the cancer site of interest, which is breast, using the Site Recode ICD-03 WHO 2008 variable. Finally, in the Selection tab, we need to make the appropriate multiple primary selection, which is first primary matching selection criteria. Within the Parameters tab, we will make the same selections as we did in Example 1. Within the Survival Calculation section, we will again make sure to select Pre-calculated duration and survival months from complete dates. For our study cutoff, we will select December 2016. Then, to minimize our output, we will again select only the 5-year interval, shown here in years, and deselect all statistics except for relative, so that we are only shown the 5-year relative survival ratio in our output. Next, in the Table tab, we will set up our output table. As we want to see the age-standardized 5-year RSRs by LIN, we can add the variable for LIN as a row variable in our table. Finally, in the Output tab, we can add a title for the final output. Clicking the lightning bolt icon will execute the session. In our output, we can see the 5-year age-standardized relative survival ratios for each LIN, as well as the unadjusted RSRs. This completes Module 3 on cancer survival. For more exercises using the SEER Stat Survival session, please visit seer.cancer.gov/seerstat/tutorials.